So before I start putting this into Repeat using Pattern Preview, I'm going to just check my resolution. So I'll come up to Image and Image Size, and I'm working at a decent resolution of 300, and I know my Repeat unit size is 32 by 32. So now, before I can use Pattern Preview, I need to turn my normal layers into smart objects. So at the moment, if I just turn some of these on and off with the visibility eyeball, you can see that this is just a multi-layered document. So all these motifs are on their own separate layer, which means that I can start to build a repeat. But like I said, we just need to convert these into smart objects. So to do that, you right click on a layer and choose Convert to Smart Object. So I'm just going to work my way up, converting these to smart objects. Now, you have to do it one by one, because if you select multiple layers and convert to smart object, it will convert them all into the same smart object. So I'm just going to speed this up for you now. Okay, so now they're all converted to smart objects, I can start to use the Pattern Preview feature to put this into Repeat. Now, smart objects themselves are not directly editable, but for this Repeat method, we don't need to be too concerned with that. If we follow the steps in this recap video, then it should be all you need to have a little go at using this feature. So if I come up to View and then drop down to Pattern Preview, I'm going to get a message that says this works best with smart objects, and hit OK. So I now zoom out and I can see a preview of what my artwork will look like if it's repeated in a block formation. So this works only with block or grid formation and not things like half drop. So this is, as the name suggests, this is just a preview. So if I want to come out of preview mode, Pattern Preview at any time, drop down from View and turn that off. Okay, so if I go back into View and Pattern Preview, so the blue square here indicates where my document is, and the rest of the motifs and artwork beyond that blue square is just a preview. Okay, so now we can use our Move tool to click and relocate motifs, and if I zoom out a bit more, we can see how this is going to look if repeated. Okay, so I can start to build up a bit of a layout. Now it is a bit limited in that you can't do a half drop, so you have to be quite careful with your layout. Now you can sort of make a bit of a half drop kind of effect if you're careful with where you place your motifs, but it won't be a true half drop. Okay, so I'm going to start just building up a bit of a layout, and I'm going to speed this bit up so that we can move on to testing out the repeat. Okay, so once you're quite happy with the layout that you've created, and then whilst you're still in Pattern Preview mode, you want to change these from Smart Object layers to normal layers. And to do that, you can select them all and rasterize them back to pixels. You can change them all at once this time. So click on the layer in the very top of the layers panel, and then hold Shift as you click on the layer at the bottom, except the background layer in this case. I've selected them all, and now I can right click and choose Rasterize Layers. And that's going to turn those from smart objects back to normal pixel layers, which are directly editable. Now I can turn pattern preview off. So view, pattern preview, and now I'm left with my tile, my 32 by 32 tile. And now choose crop, press enter and enter. I've just clipped any excess away from the edges of my tile. And now I can try out my repeat. So the first thing I'm going to need to do is define this repeat. So come up to edit, define pattern, and press OK. And that saves this pattern swatch in the Photoshop pattern library. And now I can test it out within this document by creating a pattern fill layer. So click that button at the bottom of the layers panel, choose pattern, and by default it's going to fill with something like this. If I scroll to the bottom here and choose the last item in the list, it's going to use the pattern that was last defined, and it's going to display at 100% scale to begin with, so I'm only going to see one tile. But if I change the scale to something smaller, we can start to see the pattern working. Okay, so you could leave that layer there. However, I'm going to delete it and imagine that I want to test out this pattern in a new document that's appropriate for printing on textiles via the Digital Print Bureau. So File, New, 100 by 100 centimeters at the same resolution as my design, which is 300. And now I can press Command A to select all. And with my rectangle marquee active, if I right click and choose Fill, and then where it says Contents, I want it to say Pattern. And then again, I can choose from this library of patterns here, and the last in the list is the one I've most recently defined as a pattern. Press OK, and that's filled my new document with my pattern at 100% scale. So at this point, I could save this as a JPEG, for example, which would be suitable for digital printing, but I would want to come back here and make sure I save this as a layered PSD Photoshop file so that I can always come back in and edit all these layers. So at this point, you still have the opportunity to make changes to your repeat. Now, this has been done quite quickly, and I can kind of see that it feels a bit clunky. You've got this strong pink motif that's kind of really appearing in a grid-like fashion. And you could come back into your tile document and pop these back into Smart Objects, into Pattern Preview, and start tweaking and refining your repeat. Or in this case, I think that just simply by changing this one, probably for this, another one like this, it might just soften those kind of strong repeating pink motifs. So I'm just going to make that change by duplicating that and just seeing how much of a difference that makes. Now this is not particularly accurate right now, but I think it will do the job. I'm going to place it in the same place as that other one and delete the solid one. Perhaps a little tweak. Okay, and now I want to edit and define this as a pattern again. Okay, and you can test this out again by either of the methods I showed moments ago. But let's go back into this document and create a new layer with our new defined pattern. So I'm going to fill that with the most recent in our list. Hit OK. Okay, and now it has softened the overall kind of look of the repeat, and I've got my new version on this layer up here at the top and the older one here. So if I turn that on and off, I can kind of quickly compare the difference between the two layouts. And again, you could refine this further, and sometimes it's quite a long kind of process of testing out a repeat, coming back and tweaking your tile until you're really happy with it. You might be finished with your design as it is now, but I'd just like to tag on a bit extra in this video to show you how you might choose to start combining different repeating designs into one design in Photoshop. So if I flick over to this document here, this is like a textural animal print, which I know is in repeat. Now, if I come up to image and image size, I can see that it's actually the same repeat size as my other design, 32 by 32, and the same resolution. So I could incorporate that within my other design just to see if it kind of adds any depth. So if I turn the background layer off of this for a moment and define it as a pattern, that's going to add it to my library in Photoshop. If I flick back to this, now the ground is quite flat. If you were to digitally print this, it might seem a little bit lackluster. So if I experiment with bringing in the animal print layer as a pattern fill layer, so from this drop down, I'm choosing the last in the list, which is the most recent pattern that I've defined. And if I hit OK, at the minute that's quite full on, but I could choose to just reduce the opacity a bit and maybe even try one of these other blending modes. And you could do something quite subtle or something that's quite significantly different. And I'm just going to pick something in here. So that's quite nice. And it just sort of adds another dimension to this print. So at this point, I could leave the pattern layer as it is, or I could choose to rasterize this into a normal pixel layer. And then if I just minimize those, I could do the same thing again, edit, define pattern, and now I'm defining all of that together as a new pattern swatch in my library. And then I could create a new document. And then I go select all by pressing Command A, switch to my rectangle marquee and right click, and then fill. If I choose from this drop down here, the last in the list will be the one I've just defined. Hit OK, and this has filled my new document at 100% scale. And that sort of animal print layer is quite subtle in the background, but it has sort of come through on some of these motifs because of the blending mode. But it might just add a bit more depth. And this is just an example, and it's just what I happen to have available to me right now on the computer. But you could start to experiment with all kinds of different combinations of textures and patterns and styles that you might have. To see how this method of repeat artworking using the pattern preview feature works with a different style of artwork altogether, be sure to click on the video that's linked at the end of this one to see it in action.